This is the black-nosed dace. It's
That's Sharon,
yeah.
Mike.
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah, we're still seeing the bluegill.
Picture.
Well, for one thing, I'm not
Oh,
spotlighted.
there we go. We got it.
Let me spotlight for everyone. And then I'll go back again. Right here. The hook is any streamer hook that you have. 3X or 4X long is where I usually target it. These can be bigger, or you can actually tie them smaller, but you need to make them sparse. And that's the tendency for everybody, including myself, is to way overdress these flies, put way too much bucktail in them. When you think you have enough, cut it in half, and then you still might need to take a little bit more out. The thread is black. The tail is just a little bit of red wool, which I'll have to grab here in a second. The body is flat silver tinsel, and I like to rib it with gold. That's my personal preference. I think the original was just the flat silver tinsel. The wing is white on the bottom, black in the center, and then brown on the top. So the original fly, it was designed to represent a small bait fish that's common in American streams and ponds. In the 1940s, Art Flick, who's a noted fly tyer, created this fly. It was originally tied with white polar bear, which is real translucent, topped with black bear or skunk, and then brown bucktail over the top. These days, it's white bucktail, black bucktail, and then brown bucktail over the top. The pronounced black head of both flies, or of this fly in particular, is mainly to hold down that slippery bucktail. And because it took so much thread to tie those heads down like that, these flies were commonly dressed with a painted eye. So there would be if you break a toothpick in half and make it flat, use the thick part of the toothpick to dab in some white paint and put a little white spot on both sides, let that dry, and then take the point of the toothpick and dot in some black paint over that for the pupil. I really think eyes are important. I think it's a trigger to fish. So I think it's really good to have an eye. Normally the way I tie these, I don't usually do that. I don't have the paint either, but I do think it's important if you have the chance to do that. So I'm going to go to the materials real quick here. And for this one, is that focused pretty good? I'm going to use, for the white on the bottom, of course, I'm going to use white bucktail. For the black, I'll use black bear. I just got a little piece of this from, I think it was Jay Stockard. It has a whole lot of under fur here that if you want to play around with doing dubbing, it's pretty soft. Actually, this is probably a winter bear because it's real soft, and you can tell how thick that is. But really all we're using is the guard hairs from this to get that black color. And then for the brown bear that I have is a little bit too dark, I think, to show that transition. So I'm gonna use this as a piece of a bucktail that all the white was taken away from. And so all that's left is this brown part of the bucktail. The body is some large tinsel, mylar tinsel. This is gold on one side, silver on the other. And then I like to rivet with this gold oval tinsel. So I think the hook that I'm using this time, let me size it real quick. Switch to the other. Camera. So this is a hook gauge. I've got so many of them. This looks like a size 4, a 6. This looks like a size 6. We'll take this BT's hook gauge and see if we can get a little more intel on this hook. This is, yeah, it looks like it's a size 6. And then if I hold it up on that picture like that, I can tell this is a 3X long, because if you look at the shank and where that bends over toward the eye, it's right in between the 2XL and the 4XL. So this is a 3XL, size 6. Kind of give you an idea of how hooks are sized and measured. So to start off on this fly, this fly is just going to be with black thread. So because the head of the fly is normally pretty bulky, I'm going to start my thread back a good maybe 2 eye lengths back and start laying down a flat thread base. And the way to do a flat thread base is, you see I'm holding my thread real tight, the tag of the thread here, the tail end. Let me zoom out a little bit more. And maybe let me add a light here. You give me 1 second. All right, I'm holding the tag end of this thread really tight at almost like a 90-degree angle, almost. And I'm making the wraps against that thread, so I can go pretty fast here, especially on a long shank hook. You want to be able to, you don't want to be here all day long trying to make careful wraps. But that lets you make really tightly wrapped thread wraps all the way down the hook shank. So I'll cut that loose, and then my red wool, I just saw it right here. I have a big skein of this stuff, so if anybody needs any, let me know. But I put it on some little cards like this just to kind of make sure it'll fit in my roll top desk. So I'll just take a length of this about maybe a few inches long. That'll make a few flies. On this size of a hook, on a 6 or larger, you can use a whole length of the yarn. But if you're tying them in smaller sizes, maybe down to say a 10, 8, you can peel that yarn apart and take the separate. Let me do a section of it. You can tease these. It's I think 3 pliers or 4 that are twisted around each other. This is 3. But you can pull a section out of there and use 2, or you can use 1, or even smaller flies. So I'm going to spiral and really loose the hook shank here to the front. I'll zoom in some more here so you can see better what I'm doing. And then I'm going to capture that. Now, if I went to capture that, I'm going to show you a thread problem with thread control. Sometimes as you're wrapping thread around the hook clockwise, you impart a twist in that thread. And so when you go to wrap a material in, if you loosen up at all, it jumps away from the material. But if you take your bobbin and spin it, counterclockwise as if you were looking down from above, then that'll put the twist in the other direction and it'll actually jump back and grab that material. And I want to leave a little bit of space up there. I don't want to crowd the eye of the hook too much. And then just right along the top of the hook shank, I'm going to put this red wool thread yarn. So what this is doing is actually giving the body some thickness and some bulk. And then I'll come back at the bend of the hook and cut that loose. And that becomes the tail of the fly. So now I'm going to take my Mylar tinsel. And again, it's silver on one side, gold on the other. There's the silver side, gold side. I'm going to take about 9 or 5 inches, probably closer to 9. And when I cut it at an angle, if you can see that. And that just reduces the bulk. Now I want the body to be silver as I wrap it forward, but in order to do that, I'm going to lay the gold side facing me. And then I'm going to tie that down right there at the, if you let your thread hang down, it's right there at the throat of the barb. So like right there. And then using nice tight wraps, I'm going to smooth out that body going forward. Oh, I still have my ribbing. So I could have actually tied the ribbing in at that same point, but I'll tie it in now. I'll take about maybe 6 inches of the oval gold tinsel. And again, I want to make sure this is a nice smooth body. So I'm going to keep it in the same position. I actually have this on the off side from me. Go back to that same point. And then you can see how much thread I would have saved if I would have tied that in at the same time as the flat. All right, go back to the front there. So now, as I take this flat tinsel and I start to wrap, it naturally flips over to the other side. So the gold ends up on the off side. And so I'm just going to take touching turns of that silver tinsel to make a nice shiny silver body for the inside of the fly, basically. And then when I get here to the thread, I'll take a wrap around the material, one around the shank, and then a couple over the, excuse me for bumping the camera there, a couple more over the material, and then I can cut that loose. Now, that's just how I usually tie down materials. It doesn't have to be exactly that, as long as you get several wraps over that end and it doesn't come loose. So now I wrapped that flat Mylar tinsel this way in the normal direction that we tie flies. So I'm going to take this rib and I'm going to wrap it in the opposite direction and counter wrap it. And I'm doing spaced wraps, and normally on a streamer, 3X, 4X, you want from 5 to 7 wraps of the rib. And then I'll hold that down. The hook's a little bit loose in the vise there. Second. I'll just make sure that's nice and tight. Then that's better. So I've got a few wraps over that. I'll take another couple. And then I'll clip that out. So that's the tail and the body of the black-nosed dace is done. If I wanted to get real picky, I could worry about these little things here, but the fish aren't going to care about that. You could take that tail and just kind of fluff it out a little bit with a bodkin with your scissor points or anything, just kind of grab that, fray it out. So it's just this little red kind of puff at the end there. So now for the bucktail, and I'll zoom out so everybody can see what I'm doing. The bottom is going to be white bucktail. At the base of the bucktail, this hair usually has a little bit of air in it, and if you kind of pinch it with your fingernail, you can see that it folds. Like, it's kind of hard to tell with your finger as well. That's going to kind of push it forward. But there is some thickness to this, some air inside it, and it does flare a little bit. You don't really want this fly to flare a whole lot. The stuff at the very tip of a bucktail is probably the least amount of flare. So on this piece here, the tip has broken off, but I've probably used most of that. So I'm going to grab, I want to keep it fairly sparse, and you can see this is all different lengths. But I'm going to grab a section of this white, and then the first thing I'm going to do is hand stack it. So you can see I've got 3 hairs out here that are really super long. I'm going to grab those and just pull them out, and then reorient them so they're closer to these other tips here. So then there's another layer here. So I'm going to grab those and just kind of pull those loose. And then reorient them. Now, you could stack this hair if you want. On streamers like this, I kind of like to just hand stack it and make it a little more natural of a tip at the end. But right there, I've got some pretty good You know, they come out pretty good, but I see a broken one there I can pull out. If there's some shorter stuff, you can pull that. That's took some long ones out there. Take some of the shorter ones away. And then any hairs that are really wild and sticking off to the sides, you can kind of yank those out. That one seems like it wants to hang down. I'm going to do this. One more little wild one here. I've got a pretty good bunch here now for that bottom part of the fly. A little bit more hand stacking. I can just kind of pull these shorter ones up. So normally on the wing here, I like it to be about a half a shank past. So you have to average these tips because they're not stacked. So if you average these about a half a shank past where that tail is, and then just mark it with this, with your fingers, saying that's how I want the white part to be, and grab it right there. So then I can take my scissors. I'm not going to do it here because I'll make a mess, but I'll cut it right there at my fingers over the waist bin. So now I want to start back here toward that mylar and just take the tips of those white hairs. Now there's two ways to do this. And this goes for, if you're doing the Mickey fin, it's yellow on the bottom, red in the middle, and yellow on top. For the black nose dace, again, it's white and then black in the middle and brown on top. But what you want to do is, one way of doing it is to come up around this hair and then wrap around the hair and then cinch it down. So that's kind of hard to do, but if you come around it once, you've got that hair gathered, and then when you pull down tight, it's going to keep it on top of the hook. So if you roll this around, that bundle is kept in a bundle like that, and it doesn't go rolling around the side of the hook. So I'll tie those tips down. Now I don't need to cover up all of the white at this point, and that's where I used to run into problems, is I would try to cover up all that white and I would end up with too big of a head. So any of these butts here, I'm going to go ahead and clip those off. Now I need the black. So I'm going to use this bear. If you can see the head now. Right now it's got some little white stubbies sticking up, but that'll all be covered. So I'm going to take this black bear and just kind of look at these guard hairs. That's what I'm after, is the guard hairs. And I think that'll probably be about enough. If you fold this away from the hide like that, you can get the tips pretty much aligned. So I'm going to hold it like that, and then I'll clip it right at the base of that. It's almost like leather where that was cured. So I've got this piece of black bear here. Let me zoom in here, bring it closer maybe. I'm going to just grab these tips, just the very tips. They're all pretty much aligned here, you can see. I'm just going to grab those tips and then just pull like that. So now I've got some other hair in there. You can, pieces of something that migrated in there. But most of this soft stuff underneath is the under fur that you see in just about every kind of fur. And I'm going to set that aside maybe to mix into some dubbing later. What I'm focused on right now is these guard hairs. So in the center of this fly, I want that lateral line of a fish that black section. And so I'll kind of lay this over that white and just decide where I want that to be. And then again, I'm going to mark these and I'm going to cut it loose at that point. What I mean is cut those butts off at my fingertips. And then, so one way of doing it is to just tie it down and to pinch it real tight over the top. That's how I'll do this layer. Just, I'm pinching my thumb and forefinger really tight over the shank of the hook and over that white. And then I'll spin my bobbin to give it that reaching back toward my fingers and just grab right over the butts of those hairs. And since I'm pitching it real tight, that should stay on top. So now I've got a white layer and a black layer. Looks really good on that side. This side, it's blending a little bit, but that should be okay. Now, at this point, to me, it seems like that white is flaring a little bit and it's kind of sticking up. Once this gets wet, it won't matter. But if I wanted to do this for like a show fly, you can kind of lean that hair towards you a little bit and just take like a medium wrap or two right here at the back and then come forward. And that's going to kind of lay that stuff down. So the next step then is to get some brown. And I'm just going to kind of piece around in here until I find some that I think will be enough. I think that'll be enough for the tips. So I'm going to fold it out 90 degrees and clip it as close as I can to that hide. And with any deer hair, again, I can kind of hand stack this. I don't know if you can see those tips at all. Maybe turn my camera up a little bit here. I've got like a few hairs that stick out like that. I'm going to hand stack those a little bit and get them down there. So now I'm around to another layer. I'm going to pull those out. And then I just kind of want to look at that and see if that's enough. And I don't think it will be. So I could either go back and get more hair, or I could take most of these and pull them out. And then I'll get rid of all of this fluff here. Didn't quite make it to the waste bin. There it is. Okay. So now I have pretty good bundle of the brown bucktail, and that'll be good for the top. So normally the black ends up a little bit shorter than the white or the brown. I would kind of like this to be, I think, right about like that. So I'm gonna hold it up there and mark it. And I'll take this hand and go over and cut it right at my fingertips. And then laying that a little bit more forward, I'm going to lay that right on top and give it some good thread wraps and then take a look at what I have. And that really mixed in good. I don't feel like I have the look that I want. So I'm going to give it that same way that we did the white. And I'm going to take those butts, kind of make them a little bit longer than I normally would. I'm going to go right back here to the back, make them long, and then wrap around that hair. And then as I come down on, whoops, I'm going to come right about there, and then come around those hairs. And then as I bring it down, take another wrap. I'm gonna, there we go. Another wrap. I'm gonna pull on that wing to get it a little bit shorter there. And then take some tight wraps and then take a look at what I have. So that side, now it's too far towards me. Sometimes you can crank these out really fast and sometimes it takes a little while. So I'm going to flip those ends even. I'm going to do really good pinch here. And this is what we're going to settle with. And then I'll come forward to the eye and then build that space up a little bit. And now right here, I wanted to use really tight wraps. To get that to be a cone-shaped head like that, but really tight on the deer hair so it doesn't pull through. Then I'll grab my whip finish tool and do a back to front whip finish. And like I said, I don't do the eye, the painted eye. But what I do like to do on these flies, and I think it looks really good, is to use that UV resin. You've seen me use a few times here. This I put a goodly amount on there, but if you rotate it, it'll smooth out. Like that. Maybe that's a little too much on there. I'll grab my bodkin and just draw a little bit off of that. That looks a good. And then I'll hit it with the UV light and harden that up. And the black nose dace is, that's definitely my go-to. And the reason is, this isn't the kind of deer hair with like a bass bug where it really floats solidly on the surface, but it does have a little bit of buoyancy. The Mylar body gives it a little bit of flash, so it'll attract their attention at first. But when that gets wet, it folds back like that, and you've got the black to give the lateral line, and the white for the belly, and then the brown for the other top color. The dark head and the red tail kind of give it some contrast. And the biggest key to this fly is that it's almost neutrally buoyant. So when you first throw it out there, it'll probably float on the top of the water at first. If you give it about 30 seconds, and then just give it a little twitch, it'll pull under the water. But when it goes under the water, it's just a real slow sink. And so you can do like a 10 count and then strip it back real slow. And if you don't get anything, give it maybe a 15 count. It depends on how deep the water is. But just the weight of the hook and the Mylar will let it sink a little bit. But it's just a dynamite crappie fly. Any questions on putting that together?
It's also a very, very good trout fly.
Yes, it is. It was designed for trout. Being in Omaha, I call it my crappie fly. But a black-nosed dace is a small, like a minnow, has a pronounced lateral line, but a lot of our minnows do, like the fathead minnow you go to a bait store and buy some minnows. If you look at them, they do have a pronounced lateral line. For the next fly, this will be the Grizzley King. I'll show you the recipe first, then we'll go over the materials. So nymph hook or streamer hook, 3X or 4X long. I guess by 4X you're out of nymph and into streamer. Size 6 to 12. The thread is black, of course, for the head, but under the floss, anytime you're using a little bit lighter color of floss, you want white thread underneath it, because when that floss gets wet, it's gonna kind of get translucent a little bit, and you're gonna see the black thread underneath it. So I start with a white thread and then switch to black. The tail is a red duck quill slip. And you can get as fancy as you want with this fly. The body is green floss ribbed with fine silver tinsel. The beard is a grizzly hackle. And then the wing is rolled mallard breast. You can tie these real fancy with mallard breast slips and try to get a careful like a split wing. But after the first cast, that wing's going to completely come apart. And so I think that's why these were normally tied with a rolled, especially with mallard breast feathers. They don't tend to hold up very well for even a cast or two. Get the materials here. So I've got a mess here, but basically, the tail, I normally would tie these with red saddle hackle, hackle barbs for a tail. And that's pretty commonly what people do. I had these out from the other night when we were trying to marry wings. So I'll use duck quill slips. For the body is going to be a green Danville's rayon. It's a 4-strand floss, and the rib is again mylar tinsel, but it's much smaller than what we used for the body on the black-nosed dace. The beard is it's grizzly hen hackle if you have it. I have some this is just some saddle hackle in grizzly that will work good enough. And this is the mallard flank, mallard breast. For this fly, like I showed you in the one, I'll go back to the vise here in a second. A lot of people will tie the streamer version with actual hackle wings. I showed you earlier on. You can actually do it as a hair wing with something like badger. And it would just be kind of a hair wing thing similar to what we did with the black-nosed dace. But it does give what you want is something that's white and black barred. And so the grizzly, I think, gives that quite well. If anybody has a preference, holler it out, and I'll either use the badger hair or the grizzly for the wing. Now I'll switch over to fly. Like I said, I keep talking about my go-to is the black nose dace, but I do like to experiment. Honestly, if you want to catch fish all day long, you could use a black or brown woolly bugger, but that would be boring. I like to create and use classic flies and nice looking flies or whatever. So I like to try different things, but if I'm trying things and I don't get to it, I'll go to the black nose dace. But I
Could you
have
use
definitely,
Could you use Gadwell flank feathers for that?
oh,
wing?
definitely. Teal, don't have it. Yeah, here it is. This is really barred, heavily barred. That's teal. And you could definitely use that. Again, all right, John, you get to pick. Do I use badger, teal, or mallard flank?
Teal. I like the looks of
Okay.
it.
All right. So we're gonna use the same hook. That was a size 6, 3X long. And like I said, I'm gonna start with a white thread. And not as difficult to, we don't have all that deer hair tied in at the eye of the hook. But I'm gonna try to maintain as close to wraps as I can here. I got a little short of a tag there. It's gonna be hard to hold that tight, but I'll do a pretty tight thread base here so it's nice and smooth. I don't want lumps and bumps. And I'll go back to the end of the shank. Right there. And the first thing I'm going to tie in is actually, let's go a little bit fancy on this. I'm going to use a piece of that. This is a smaller Mylar tinsel. It says size 16, 18 on there. I don't know the brand, but it's probably about the width of the actual diameter of the hook shank. It's pretty small stuff. So I'm going to cut a piece of that and I'm going to tie that in gold side facing me like I did before. It's not very thick, so it's not going to cause any bulk. But I just want to kind of get this tied down, but then I'm going to do loose wraps to get it out of the way. And I'll come back on that. I'm going to take, you know what? Let's go gold this time. I'm going to do silver side facing me. Tie it down tight, and then I'll just move forward to get it out of the way. And then as I wrap it around, the gold side will be wrapped around. So I'm going to do 4 wraps as a little tag here. That's 3, 4. Then I'm going to come back 1, 2, 3. Have to kind of watch that hook band. 4, or the hook point, I mean. And then I'm going to bring my thread back. And then tie that down. Just give it a couple good wraps there. Why don't I just go ahead and bring it forward enough to point it in the right direction. And then I'll cut that loose. I'll tie it in here in a second for the rib. So that's my tag. If you wanted to get really fancy again, you would take a left and a right. I'll show you what I mean there. Left and a right duck quill. Let's see. So if you look at the colorful side of the feather here, let me zoom out. Look at the colorful side of the feather. This side is more, it's maybe shinier, but that's like the back side of the feather. You can see that the long barbs are on opposite sides there. And if you wanted to get fancy, you'd take the same number of barbules from the right and from the left. But it's not going to stay very long. And so you can take one slip like this. I took about, that's about 9 or 5 barbules. And I want those to kind of point up and just give me a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to do a pinch wrap. So go back to the point where I want it to be tied in, which is right back here at the where that gold tag ended. And then I'm going to bring the thread up between my thumb and the material, and then down between my finger and the material, and then pull straight down while I'm pinching. I'm going to go back up and do the same. And now I have a little tail sticking up right there. So now I can clean that up. And that's pretty much right on top of the hook shank. And a little red tag there. My one end of my rib ended up folding back. So I'm just going to cut that away. And then wrap this forward because I don't want any kind of bumps. Speed up a little bit here, hit fast forward. So now I have my tail, and I'm going to go ahead and tie in my rib at this point. Actually, I could do that a little bit further down the shank so I don't waste it. So I'm going to take my thread now, kind of a thing about thread control. I'm going to take my bobbin and spin it counterclockwise as if I was looking down on it, and that flattens that thread out. So as I'm rolling back, and I can spin it as I'm rolling backwards here, it gives me wider thread and it's flatter. And so that lets me maintain that flat surface. Then I want a gold rib, so I'll tie it silver facing me. It's kind of hard to tell on this real thin tinsel, but so I don't jostle my tail. I want that rib to be on the opposite side. And then I'll wrap that forward. Now there's 2 ways to do the tinsel. Because this is 4-strand, it's pretty thick. I like to use 2 strands, and this will do multiple flies. So I'll go with about maybe an 8-inch length. and cut that loose. So I have 4 strands here. I'm going to take 2 of those loose. And then I'm going to come forward to the front. Take a couple of wraps over that floss, and then I can pull it to the right length. About right there. Wrap this back. Now I'm not worrying about flat thread right now, but when I go back, I will. So now I have a little bit of a bump at the back. I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise, and then I'll have relatively flat thread. I'll go ahead and take that back on the off side and then move back forward with as flat a thread as I can. I don't see any lumps or bumps. So I'll hit fast forward here and wait there at the front. So with this floss, if you right at first, if you take it and just stroke it through your fingers, I've been moving bricks and garden work and all that kind of stuff. Some people, if they're doing the Atlantic salmon flies that are real fancy, they'll use like even silk gloves. But all you really want to do is just get that floss as flat as you can be. And you don't want any like wild little fibers hanging out. And if you're careful, this will stay close together. Avoid the hook point. And then just color that body like that. Looks like it's okay. Move that rib out of the way. That's why you want to have at least, say, 9-10 inches of floss to work with.
Mike, why not use the rotary feature of your vise to do that?
You know, you could, but I'm not used to it.
Okay,
And then
yeah,
let
you
me,
gotta secure all your materials, you gotta get
Right.
your thread out of the way, yeah, okay.
I'll tell you what, if you have a rotary vise, it's definitely something to experiment with. But if you get it to where you can get your materials out of the way, you can do the rotary, and especially if you have one of those fancy
The Norvise,
yeah, Norvise.
Yeah.
So now
I
that's
find
kind
it
of,
just, I find it makes my wraps a little bit more consistent and a little more even.
it does and it can, but you really have to get used to it.
Yeah,
And once you are, then it can be a game changer.
yeah,
Um, so I actually wrapped that down and then I kind of wrapped back over it this way just to make sure that doesn't come loose, but it shouldn't. I've never had that happen.
yeah, and I'll give Al a plug, he's got a really good book on how to use rotary vices, so.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to take that tinsel with the gold side facing me. And again, I'll do about 5 to 7 spaced wraps and just try to get them as even. You know, a good slant a little bit here and as even as possible. And that looks beautiful. So I'll clip that off. Now we want a hackle. Now, the original called for a hen hackle. And this is, I believe it's even, I think it was sold as a woolly bugger pieces. It's got a little piece of hide there and then these feathers attached to it. But if you look at some of these, like that one right there is really webby. That's almost like a hen hackle right there. Other than being like Christmas tree shaped here, it's got really webby fibers, and those give that bulk that you need. I don't want a real thick stem though. So I think for this, and even kind of looking at I want my beard. I think I'm going to go like right about it here on the stem. And I'll just use this feather. Pluck it loose. You could probably use, say back in here. That won't be too bad. I'll use this further back. So what I like to do is just kind of take off all this stuff you know you won't use and just get it out of your way. And then I can cut that. Cut that out of the way so it's not bothering me. And then you can either tie it in by the stem or further up, but I think in this case it's going to be probably easy to do the nice side of the feather facing me, so the dull side's facing away. Take several really tight wraps, and that's where it helps to have that space at the head. I see a couple things in the chat. Is there any questions, or there's somebody leaving?
I have to leave at 7 because I got the Oakhart Lodge thing, for
Oh, okay.
everything tonight.
Yeah,
I-
Linda
I
had to
gotta go
leave
to that
because her
one.
battery was dying.
All right.
My battery is dying.
Bill, next week I'll instead of doing a PowerPoint, I'll show you some examples of different colors of hackle for
Okay.
colors and patterns and all that stuff like you had some questions about.
Next week, Bill's
Yeah,
gonna
I
be
don't-
in Michigan on the
Oh.
Pierre Marquette River.
That's right. Thursday.
All right,
I'm in
I'll wait.
Michigan.
I'll wait until you're back.
Okie dokie. Hey, y'all be safe.
You too. Travel safe
Yes, sir.
and
See
catch
you
fish.
Friday.
All right.
I will try to.
So I'm doing about 4 or 5 wraps. I want kind of a thick beard on here. I like thick beards, except on myself. So I did a wrap over that. I'm going to take one more wrap over the feather. And then I'm just going to kind of work back towards it. That sends all those hackles toward the back, and it also locks that tip in. And then I'll just flip that out. If I lost a couple of those on top, that's okay. I usually kind of stroke them down anyway. Now, if you really wanted to kind of get fancy with this beard, you could stroke everything down and go with a wrap over the top. Another one. And then it hangs down below. I kind of like it to be a little bit more loose. So we'll just kind of lean it in that direction. Like that. Now for the wing, which is the last part, I've got I think these are teal. I want to look for one with some pretty long, since this is a 3X long hook, I want some pretty long ones. So let me kind of pull a few out and pick one that looks good. Maybe this one. Yeah, that should be good. Say maybe this side. So if you pull them out 90 degrees away from the stem, you can see the tips kind of line up pretty good. I'm just going to grab that section and then cut it. I could pull them away, but I'm afraid all that work I did evening up the tips will kind of mess that up. So here's what I have. There's a little bit of scruff in there, but that's pretty good. It's a little weak. So what I'm going to do is tie in this much for now, and then I'll tie in another piece. Got a few short ones there. I want to twist this around to where it looks like it's kind of facing down like that. There we go. All right. So I will cut the end there. Especially at the head, I like to cut the feather first and then apply it because a lot of times you are trying to fight the bulk at the head and you end up with a really fat head. There's the first application, and I think this would be a good opportunity to bring in a black thread before I forget. Now, if I forgot, all I had to do was get a Sharpie and color my white thread black. I've done that a few times. So I'll tie that down good. And then I'll grab a few more of those teal barbules. Another good clump of them here. Cut them loose. Those are nice and dark bars. Got some of them pulled through, it looks like. Nope. Nice tight wraps to make sure that all holds down. And you can tell I grabbed a thin thread because I'm wrapping like crazy and it's not covering anything up. There we go. Flatten the thread out some.
Must be Semperfly Nano Silk.
It is.
Yeah. I love that stuff, but you're right. It takes forever to cover.
Yeah, it's pros and cons. Not very good at covering, but it won't give you too much problem with bulk. So shape that head nice, and we're just about done here. And I'm gonna fish that. So grizzly beard, and then that barred rolled wing.
That really nice fly, Mike.
Really, that'd be a nice Christmas fly. I should have
Yeah,
been zoomed
yeah.
in closer. It'd be a really nice Christmas fly. And again, you can use whatever head cement you have, but since we did the tag, we'll do the UV resin for the head. Any questions on the Grizzly King? It was actually created in Scotland in the early 1800s by a professor and zoologist, James Wilson. And his brother, John Wilson, created the Professor, which is a pretty popular wet fly. You'll probably see the Grizzly King, that wings a little bit sideways. Grizzly King, and you'll definitely see the Professor in Bergman's tiles of his wet flies. That gives it a beautiful head, and I love the green and red color. So I will fish that this weekend if the weather holds.
You gonna be at Walnut this weekend?
Yes, probably. I think if I had, those feathers were a little bit short, and I think that's just because they were teal.
Yeah.
I think if I had my druthers, those wings would come out about another little bit, like closer toward the end of the tail. But
You may try to get out this weekend at the Walnut as well. You're fishing off the dam, right?
yes,
Okay.
mallard flank and teal and gadwall and all of these, the breast and the flank feathers, a lot of times are these fine dark markings. And that not only kind of looks like scales, it also gives kind of an impression of movement in the water. So I think the fine dark markings are always a great thing. The wood duck is so expensive, I would never use it for something like this, but mallard flank is real cheap, and that'd be a great thing to use for this wing. So again, here it is with the with deer hair hanging off of it. You could use a grizzly feather for a wing. I actually put some grizzly or some mallard in there for kind of cheeks.
Yeah.
With a wrapped grizzly hackle. Here I pulled it down as a beard, and there it's wrapped around the surface. This is a hackle fiber tail compared to the little duck quill slip. Those duck quills are pretty cheap if you can find them. You can't find goose, but you should be able to find duck. And then, like I said, the floss that I had when I made this was a lot closer to olive, but I like that rich green color in comparison.